Okay, good morning. I'm Steve Costigan. I'm the regional CTO here at Zadara for EMEA. I'm joined by Andy Slater, Technical and Innovation Director for Cloud at Node 4. Andy, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about you and a little bit about what you do at Node 4?
Yeah, of course. So Node 4. I'm going to talk a little bit about Node 4, but I'm here to add a bit of color. We're a Zadara partner, both in terms of utilizing the Zadara platform, but also as part of the ecosystem to provide services and capabilities to other partners. So my job at Node 4 is around everything from kind of hyperscaler, public cloud, into all the platforms and services into the data center. So very focused on product, service offering, solutions, and bringing that all to life for our customers and partners.
Great, thanks, Andy. So that sets up perfectly, really, what we're trying to get across in this webinar. For organizations to think about their business, think about their applications. Do they fit your future needs? Are they scalable? Do they meet your business values? And of course, we find ourselves in turbulent times, platform re-engineering, organizations looking to change, maybe moving into a cloud or bringing resources back from a cloud. So, very much a fluid, dynamic market. And part of the reason of introducing Node 4 into this webinar is really to highlight those capabilities of being able to do many different things, but think more about your business. Is that just rehosting an application or rehosting your whole infrastructure? Are you looking to re-platform? Are you looking to re-architect? And I think this is where partnerships like Node 4 can really add some value on top of what Zadara does and what it brings. But of course, like many things, there's timescales, there's risk, there's capabilities. And really what we want to try and get across in this webinar is how the use of multi-tenancy can help you, whether you're an enterprise customer or whether you're a service provider. And I think there's nothing better than having an organization that is using these capabilities and rolling that into their own platforms and what they're delivering. So Andy, can I hand over to you? Because I think you've just done a fantastic report that's out there in the market. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we wanted to start really with a mid-market report. So Node 4, every year we do something called a mid-market report, and we focus that very much on the UK market. And customers really are organizations with 1,000 to 5,000 employees, which is kind of our main kind of stomping ground as a partner, but also the partners that we work with as well. That kind of segment of the market is really interesting. So every year we get an independent survey company. We have a long list of questions, and we just throw the questions out there and see what comes back. So this year we interviewed over 600 people. So they were mainly split between IT and then C-level business owners. And it's an amazing report. I would encourage everyone to go and download it. We cover everything from security, AI, through the whole stack really, and hybrid working. This bit of a headline grabber really shocked us and surprised us. So we normally ask this question every year and we get an answer back in terms of, we ask if anyone's really looking to repatriate from the public cloud. So it says planned public cloud migration. There's a wider question above that, really, if anyone's looking to pull any applications back. Now, we timed this, so it was literally like the week after Trump announced all his tariffs. So I would take some of this with a little bit of an emotional, not a pinch of salt, but I would say a bit of a lens on it. And I think what we saw very differently. So you can see here that there's the highest category is people pulling back a few applications. So it's not a whole scale repatriation, but there's definitely a move in the market around people really reassessing cloud first strategies. It's more of a reassessment than I think than a wild scale repatriation. So a couple of the things that really came up higher than normal. So performance considerations is always a big kind of bone of contention. And I think that's really with if people have lifted and shifted workloads, maybe some gnarly databases or something, but it's not quite worked out on the public cloud. Whereas data sovereignty and risk management rank really high. So we're not seeing that at Node 4 yet, this big repatriation, whether that's going to come, and this is a kind of an early signal. But what we are seeing is a lot more reticence for doing lift and shift workloads into the public cloud. So within Node 4, within our partners, we've got a much bigger demand for people moving from on-premise. Obviously, we've got a big, I would say, a Broadcom push from on-premise. And then at the other end, there's a reticence for kind of wild scale kind of public cloud adoption. That absolutely, we've got a lot of movements in terms of SaaS and application modernization. But what normally happens is that first 20%, 30% of applications to modernize is nice and easy, and then you're stuck with kind of the wider estate. So I just wanted to put some commentary on that because I think it's a great time to talk about hybrid cloud and hybrid infrastructure, all because we've got parts moving in every direction. So if you can move us on to the next slide, Stephen, I'll just tell you a bit about Node 4 and what we do and kind of how our business is formed. So I work in the cloud area, and that is encapsulated by our modern and secure hybrid infrastructure offering. This is a kind of joined up public cloud, data centers, edge infrastructure. I'll talk about that on the next slide, but a very clear hybrid cloud, hybrid network pulled together offering for clients. Some of the other areas where we focus on is the AI powered workplace, customer excellence. So here it's all about empowering employees and call center with kind of greater tools, more Copilot or AI enabled tools for managing core workflows and things within a call center. Unified data and AI. This is very focused on prescriptive analytics, bringing data together in things like Azure Fabric and effectively getting more meaning and capability. We're doing a lot of work around positioning a platform for AI, as well as we've got a number of services around kind of core database services and management. The modern business empowered business applications, part of the business there is very focused on ERP, especially Dynamics 365. We acquired a company called the Nav People. So in that area, we've got a lot of capability there. And then the final bit is the bit that pulls it all together in our managed services. And that's everything from full scale IT outsourcing down to kind of normal kind of managed services. So Node 4 is a bit of a wider beast. We get lots of customers maybe recognize as a data center provider, but other people recognize us as a Microsoft partner. So yeah, we've got quite a big ecosystem of capability. I just want to set the scene really from what Node 4 is and looks like today. You can just go to the next slide, Steve, and then I'll go through this and shut up and let you talk. So where Zadara fits into the picture and how we leverage Zadara in our hybrid infrastructure play. From a Node 4 perspective, we work with partners and customers kind of across this, what we call our hybrid infrastructure. So we know most of our customers have got an element of public cloud. That could be in things like M365, Dynamics, in SaaS or infrastructure where they've modernized applications into, app services, Azure SQL, that kind of capability. Our job is really building the glue and the stickiness to bring that all together. So what we build in our data centers is really platforms and services that what we call addressing the 3 Cs. So that is cost, complexity, and compliance. They're the 3 levers really that maybe keep workloads in our data centers rather than kind of wholesale migrations into public cloud. So maybe it's cheaper or more effective to run it in a data center. Maybe there's compliance around data sovereignty, or maybe it's just complex. I spoke to a customer last week who was running a mixture of Spark, Solaris, and HPUX systems. So those kind of things need to be stuck nicely in cotton wool in co-location. So our platform there, that is our kind of shared IS platform, is called Virtual Data Center. And we leverage Zadara very, very intensely there. But it's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. So VDC is an ecosystem of services. It does include a kind of VMware IS platform. Well, that's our main landing zone for customers that are moving on-premise or partners looking to build their own cloud platform out to support customers' onward journey. And Zadara has been very, very useful for us in that context of being that Swiss Army knife for all the storage and the compute elements we need to augment some of the other systems in there. And the blend of the OpEx model with some of the more CapEx elements in VDC just gives us a really good toolkit that whatever customers bring into our ecosystem, we know we can solve it. And certainly we're seeing more increased interest at the edge, especially in kind of retail and manufacturing sectors, whereby we're having to do more with things like AI and resilience, and we're needing slightly different capabilities like containerization at the edge. And we think that's all coming nicely together in this unified picture. So that's Node 4, that's what we do. That's a little bit of an overview of where Zadara fits into as a bit of our puzzle in terms of bringing this together for customers. So I'm going to hand back over to Steve now, who can tell you about more of the Zadara approach and the multi-tenancy capabilities that obviously we leverage quite heavily.
Thanks, Andy. That was a great insight into a real use case of how to leverage Zadara's capabilities, but then augment that with your own skills and your own capabilities, and demonstrate, that capability of cooperation and collaboration. So, with that, I want to touch on a couple of things. If we look at some of the things you touched on there, organizations who may just do lift and shift, some may be replatforming. Typically that is intense. You mentioned there, the first 20% is easy. Everything else from there on gets harder and harder. And typically what we see is things don't happen in big bang approaches. Typically you'll have multiple teams in a development and a modern development life cycle. You've probably got multiple teams looking to deploy multiple applications in parallel, and then look to do that in a seamless way as possible within any organization. And what we're seeing in the market is a shift towards AI inferencing. I think if you look at the last 3 years or so, the launch of ChatGPT and those large language models, those training models, the hyperscalers have done an incredible job of building those infrastructures, and they're huge. Some of them are 16,000 plus GPUs. So, to deploy that in an edge location may not be technically feasible. You may not have the resources to do that. So those training models have delivered large language models that are, a lot of them are open source, especially from the likes of Meta. So what that brings is the need then to do something with those at the edge. And what we're talking about the edge, there could be different use cases. We talked about, or Andy talked about manufacturing and retail there. They're a prime use case for needing stuff at the edge. But when we look at the development platforms, those developers typically need to be able to develop their applications and run that in a mechanism that they can be really, really comfortable that they can deploy in any location of choice. And this is where multi-tenancy, from an infrastructure perspective, multi-tenancy as you come up the layers, whether that's Kubernetes, whether that's other containerized systems, and I'll talk more about those as we go through this. But eventually, you're getting to a point where the application is being developed in a containerized environment. You want to provide some level of isolation. We're seeing ransomware attacks continue in many organizations, especially in retail at this moment in time. So this ability to isolate your infrastructure, but then deploy in a simple methodology, this is where inferencing and AI inferencing, it's another application. We have to treat it as another application. But where this is heading is it's becoming the glue. Andy mentioned the word glue. AI inferencing is becoming that glue into your operations, into your applications. And that's what I want to take you through, is on that journey, and where we've been able to augment Node 4's capabilities, especially their DBA as a service capabilities, into our stack from an alliances perspective. And this is where that collaboration really starts to bear fruit. So, from our perspective, we believe that multi-tenant Kubernetes, it needs a platform. You need to be able to offer multi-tenancy right the way through the stack, because your storage requirements for one application may be different to another application. You may need to support backup applications within that same infrastructure. And if everything is all in one tier and everything is all at one level, then you open up many different problems. So being able to offer a cloud capability on premises via a partner like Node 4, and then being able to augment that with GPU pass-through, enables you to modernize over time. So we see Kubernetes very much as a platform of enablement, and our partnership with NVIDIA pushes that out when you start to look at things like NVIDIA NEAM. And again, I'll talk about those as we go through this. But that being said, VMs are not going away. People will re-platform. Yes, people will deploy new applications. But in most environments, even if you go to a hyperscaler, the majority of the infrastructure is VM-based. If you look at the majority of Kubernetes, it's being deployed in a VM-based environment. So, the augmentation of different applications sat alongside a containerized application, sat along an AI inferencing, is critical. But you need to have the ability to do this in an automated fashion. And I think this is where cloud and cloud technologies have really helped drive things forward. But we can't forget the data. Databases are in every single environment. I don't know of any organization that today that relies completely on spreadsheets, that doesn't have a database, doesn't have some sort of system that relies on a structured data. And this then becomes the underpinning key part of any AI infrastructure that you're looking to deploy. If you're looking to deploy AI inferencing against your own data in a RAG model, or looking to get best value from your applications, you're going to need to ensure that your databases are in tip-top condition, and then augment that with more modern application stacks, maybe utilizing things like Crew AI or Apache Spark, or taking TensorFlow and really digging into analytics in a different way. And that sort of really leads on to that partnership with Node 4 and the database as a service capability. Andy, can I hand back to you at this point? Can you talk us through the Node 4 multi-tenant database management capabilities?
Yeah, so this is something that we've done for a long time. We've got a big history of kind of core database management, and we've been working with Zadara to try and industrialize this across the Zadara ecosystem. So effectively, we've got a team of DBAs at Node 4. I actually used to own the company called Onomy that sold about 7 years ago now. I think it was 8 actually to Node 4. So why is this really important is that if you've got customers, or in your own environment, you've got databases and you've not got a DBA on staff, then this really brings in a load of experience and capability to almost outsource that responsibility to manage the databases. So everything from SQL Server or Oracle, and we've got some really well drilled kind of monitoring and maintenance tooling and capability that will really drive the best kind of performance and security out of it. I think it's so important. We see lots of customers out there who've probably built something like a SQL Server environment maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and then kind of once you've built it, it kind of really just degrades over time as people change code around it, as people mess around with servers, etc. And we can really focus on optimizing the performance and keeping it healthy and kind of in rude health. And ultimately the database is the thing that's going to really influence that performance and capability of the onward applications. So yeah, it's a great service. We're fully UK SC cleared staff, and we kind of work 24/7 to manage a whole range of databases and data platforms for our partner community.
Thanks, Andy. And I think, you know, when we start to look at more modernization workloads, you know, people are starting to look at AI inferencing, looking at getting value from their existing data. You know, we're starting to evolve into the tokenization world, where people are looking at the cost of tokens. You know, how much is it costing me to run a query? You know, if you look at, you know, many organizations, you know, we've grown up with Google and search, and then we look at ChatGPT, and the cost of doing that, you know, the cost of those tokens is getting more and more expensive. When you add that into your own data, you know, the cost of having poor database services means that you're going to wait longer and longer. That's actually going to cost you money over time. So, you know, it's really, really important to have that database alignment within your business. And I think it's something that, you know, we see organizations are not thinking about in their AI, certainly their AI inferencing journey. And that brings on nicely then to, you know, those more modern applications, you know, looking at pipeline application deployment. You know, as we look at infrastructure and it's changing, you know, you hear lots of things about platform engineering, and, you know, organizations taking a more modern approach, whether that's a cloud native Kubernetes infrastructure and you managing that completely on your own. Having that multi-tenancy capability from Zadara enables you to isolate that off. And additionally, you may decide, okay, I don't need to run at that scale, but I still need smaller scale Kubernetes deployments. You may run something like micro-K8s from Canonical, Ubuntu. You may want a mid-tier offering, maybe something like Portainer, that gives you, you know, a infrastructure that is manageable or even homogeneous to do that. Or you may want a complete managed outsource capability to sit over the top and do that, you know, in a multiple environment. And that's really where managed service from the likes of Tycoon, who have done great integration into Zadara, you know, they can deploy into a Zadara VPC in a matter of minutes, a full infrastructure. So, you know, as you start to look at your application deployments, you know, are they native Helm charts? Are you running NVIDIA NGC NIM infrastructure and those blueprints? Are you looking at extracting that value, you know, running database services that are more like a vector database like Elastic, or utilizing MongoDB, and then overlaying that with, you know, deeper insights into that data, more data lake type infrastructure with Apache Spark, etc. The key then is, you know, automation. How do you get that level of automation? And the key from our perspective is it's around delivering everything via an API. So from a compute perspective, we provide AWS compatible APIs. So if you're familiar with running an infrastructure and deploying that using infrastructure as code into AWS, then if you take those EC2 instances, you take that EBS, you take, you know, those auto scaling groups, Elastic IP, security groups, all of VPCs, all of that good element of best practice that AWS has developed in terms of their cloud infrastructure and the multi-tenancy behind that, we're able to deliver that via Node 4 as an on-premises capability into their DCs, and also be able to deploy this at the edge in a completely isolated environment. And what that then means is you can utilize maybe the best of both, especially if you want to use things like DR. And I'll cover that as we go through. But the compute element, that ability to do everything via an API, drives that automation, and it's really, really critical. You know, if you've got a lack of skills or you're struggling to get skills, having automation, being able to automate things is very, very critical. And it's the same from our storage perspective. You know, we started life as storage as a service attached into AWS, providing enterprise storage. We were able to very quickly, very early deploy multi-region, multi-zone SQL failover clusters, 9, 10, 11 years plus. We've then augmented that with our on-premises capability through our partners, delivering things like a Kubernetes CSI driver, working with OpenStack and providing driver, working with KMS integration so that you own the encryption keys, not us, not the partner. So, just all sorts of different things of being able to work with APIs and drive that automation. And that automation comes along as infrastructure as code. This is the piece where instead of defining how you're going to cut the menu, you're going to state what the menu is at the end. And this is really where the likes of Pulumi, Terraform from HashiCorp or OpenTofu as an open source alternative, using tools like Ansible, deploying via Kubernetes. Everything that we do is open API compatible. So whether that's the compute layer, whether that's a storage layer, you can automate your whole infrastructure end to end. So if you're utilizing infrastructure as code to do your deployment, deploy your EC2 instances, deploy your storage, manage your storage, means you can set that up, you can manage that and run that with a high degree of automation. And having organizations that have got professional services skills that can sit on top of that if you don't have them yourselves, this is where the likes of Node4 and their professional services team really start to drive that to a new level. So if we look at platform enablement, how do we do this? What does it mean to you from a cost perspective? Well, most organizations, they're doing things over time. And Andy mentioned the Swiss Army knife, what Zadara is in terms of that flexibility, that dynamic capability. We've had customers that have been with us for 8, 9, 10 years, and that actually includes Node4 as a customer. Through some of their acquisitions, Node4 as an organization has been with Zadara for 10 years. And that's enabled us to migrate processes or migrate infrastructure over time. They've been able to take advantage of that, utilizing some key capabilities that we've brought to market, like multiple VLAN ISA into a VMware environment. But what that means is workloads change. They change over time. You need something that's dynamically composable, and you need to be able to retire infrastructure out, and you need to be able to bring new infrastructure in. And I think our ability to have that dynamic scalability and to be able to cost that in where you're paying for exactly what you use, when you use, and where you use it is a really key part of what we do. So if we look at those cloud services, they consist of those EC2 instances, that EBS storage, VPC model, load balancer, the ability to do GPU pass-through for those AI inferencing or VDI workloads. Again, different use cases for GPUs that exist out there. And then underpinning all of that is the Zadara storage services, so block storage into fiber channel environments, into SCSI environments, ISA, as I mentioned, for that really high performance, low latency network offering into the likes of VMware. And then alongside that, having NFS CIFS with Active Directory integration. And because these are delivered as virtual arrays, we're able to microservice that effectively so that each tenant has got their own dedicated storage controllers, their own dedicated CPU and RAM is assigned into that, their own dedicated networking. And I'll touch on how we actually do that in a little while. But then to augment that, we have objects storage with S3 and Swift capabilities. And again, when we look at how that's being utilized, again, Node4 fit into that with their Veeam backup services, making use of our S3 immutable object storage to provide a level of assurance and capabilities around Veeam backup and recovery services. So the physical aspects of what we're doing to enable you to do things in a more dynamic way. Remember, we mentioned here around infrastructure as code. Every application is different though. So you may need, let's say you're running retail at the edge or manufacturing at the edge, and you're bringing video content in, and you want to process that at high performance and low latency. Having NVMe pass through on an EC2 instance enables you to store that data and analyze that data at really high levels, because it's probably transient data. You're probably looking at objects. You're probably trying to determine whether that data has value before then passing that on. So having dynamic scalability on those EC2 instances, having that ability to have NVMe pass through, and then having a choice of different CPU and GPU options depending upon what your workloads require, again, gives you that flexibility and dynamic ability that really a cloud infrastructure delivers. And having multi-tenancy enables you to separate those workloads off. So having a database system in one VPC, a application running in a completely different tenant VPC, but then being able to connect those with our direct peering environment means that you can isolate your database team from your application team. And when you're looking at security and ensuring the lateral movement of a compromise, multi-tenancy starts to come into play there and have a real difference. So having those independent scalable capabilities, auto scaling groups, looking at your web farm, CPU utilization, RAM utilization, then automatically deploying a new instance, means that automation is happening on your behalf. It means your support teams are having to do less because they're not having to monitor things and react because the system is reacting. So those premium instances and having that ability of saying, actually, I need more cores, I need faster cores. Okay, again, building that into the infrastructure is a key part, but then wrapping all of that up is that AWS compatibility. From a storage perspective, it's the same. As I've mentioned earlier, we've got all of those capabilities in terms of block, file, and object. We can utilize different media, HDD, SSD, hybrid between the two, where we can do SSD tiering down to magnetic media or even off to object storage. And that comes with a full suite of capabilities: snapshots, replication, instant recovery, instant mount points, NAS file systems integrated in with block. So again, it's all of those capabilities that you want from an enterprise storage capability, but delivered on a scalable model as that Swiss Army knife, being able to change things over time. So taking that architecture, we are different. This ability to dedicate CPU cores, dedicate RAM, dedicate virtual networking to bypass the underlying hypervisor infrastructure and allocate physical drives to that customer. We talk about data sovereignty. We talk about isolation of resources. This is what sets us apart from everybody else in the industry. It's that ability to say, application A or customer A has these resources. We can change them. We can add CPUs. We can change the model. We can go from 2 CPU cores to 48 CPU cores within a single VPSA instance, so VPSA virtual private storage array. And then we can migrate over time. And I think Node 4 is a great example of this. 10 years ago when we first started, the storage infrastructure was on 900 gig SAS drives to replace an aging EMC environment. When we released our SSD drives, we were able to do online migration from those HDDs to SSDs. When we introduced larger SSDs, we went through the process again. Why did we do that? It enabled Node 4 to be competitive in the market. It enabled them to switch technology, and it enabled them to do things with their customers. A retail customer comes to mind, taking a database system that they were running, and being able to run reports faster because we'd moved them from HDD to SSD. And then further augmenting that by moving them to ISA as a capability, delivering more throughput, lower latency. When you add all of that in, it amounts to severe cost savings because you're able to run those same workloads on smaller engines. My sales team won't thank me for saying that, but it enables you to cost optimize your environment, and that means that you're getting more for your money. So wrapping that up, this ability to do any protocol, any data type in any location of your choice brings a unique capability from a storage perspective. But it's not just all about having a complete stack. It's about that ecosystem integration, and this, I think, is one of our biggest strengths, is our ability to support multiple vendors and multiple options around us. So if I talk around VMware and stretch clusters and ISA, and Andy, you're a great use case for this, because this is something that you as an organization have been able to implement into your VMware VDC for some of your customers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I think the reason we've implemented this is, like, as a service provider, you don't quite know what's coming when you sign a project and someone's emptying their, they're shutting an office or a data center. And in this instance, we had a retailer with a very horrible old ERP system with a back-end SQL server that was just, when we found out when we were moving it, it was just basically just dominating their on-premise SAN infrastructure. So when we tried to move it into a virtual platform, it was just kind of like just nowhere near the performance from a validation perspective. So this was a lifesaver because we managed to make sure that we kept the same model in terms of the infrastructure as a service model. They could spin the VM up, but at the back end, we were giving them a dedicated virtual storage array. So, to meet their performance requirements. So it is, sometimes it's hard on a multi-tenant platform trying to have standardization. But again, from a Zadara perspective, what's important for me is that we don't know what's coming, but this was a really good example whereby we leveraged this capability to meet quite a gnarly requirement from a customer and just deliver them what they needed. So yeah, it was really useful.
Thanks, Andy. So that builds on in terms of this infrastructure and really about that ability to underpin multiple infrastructures. We can concurrently support from the same storage infrastructure, VMware, Hyper-V, Zadara's compute. This again gives you dynamic flexibility. You can move things over time, you can change things over time, you can add new applications. You can say, okay, we're going to maintain our Hyper-V or VMware environment, but then we're going to augment it with this new Kubernetes infrastructure that we're going to build is going to sit alongside that. And again, because of that dynamic capability, we can deliver all of that. We can sit alongside your existing infrastructure, and we can augment what you're already doing. It's not a big bang approach. Very few organizations can afford to do a big bang approach. Therefore, having that ability to move over time is really key. And we see this from some of the migration pieces as well. People wanting to utilize our storage capabilities and then migrate certain workloads across and then transform them. And then we've got the VPC model, but we've also developed a model called DVS, Distributed Virtual Switch. And those of you that are familiar with VMware will be familiar with that term. But what this allows us to do is create a project for a customer that's isolated off. We isolate those VLANs off to that tenant, and that can sit alongside the same network that their existing infrastructure is on across multiple VLANs. So if you've got VMware, or you've got Hyper-V, or you've got Proxmox, or you've got OpenStack or any other infrastructure, but even bare metal, or maybe you want to augment this. Maybe you're running some NVIDIA HGX, DGX environment, and you want some networks and VMs to sit alongside that to do different services. This is a perfect platform to be able to do that without having to completely reinvest in new infrastructure. To support all of that, we've got the ability to back up these environments and the ability to replicate these from different locations. And I think this is a critical component of really where we're heading as an organization. If you were to deploy Zadara on an edge platform, maybe in your own data center, and you need a backup and recovery partner, then that object storage deployed from Node 4's data centers can act as that target. And then in the event of something happening, you've then got the potential of using Node 4 and Node 4's multi-tenant capabilities to be able to recover back into their environment. So again, it just enables you to think in a different dynamic. You may decide, well, I'm going to move everything into Node 4 and let Node 4 manage everything for me. But again, if we deploy on premises and then we swing it in this way, it gives you that ability to use snapshot-based replication. And we also have some really nice tools. Remote clones are a particular one. And again, this came around as a need from Node 4 many years ago, of the need to project a volume from a data center in Manchester back to one in Edinburgh, and having that ability to instantly mount that volume from anywhere that's got access to that VPSA or the object storage, again, is great from a recovery perspective, especially when you're looking at recovery from things like ransomware and you want to go to a snapshot that's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or even a day ago. Again, gives you a unique capability in being able to control how your environment looks. And also, if that recovery is into a private environment, then maybe you can use that for periodic testing for your own recovery environments as well. So adding in, I wanted to talk about other integrations with the likes of Veeam. And again, the reason for talking about this is because this is a service that Node 4 has. They have this ability to be able to provide that VCSP Cloud Connect, where they're going to take a secondary copy of your Veeam backup data. They're going to hold that. They're going to hold that as an immutable copy into the Zadara object storage. And depending upon how you're set up, if you've got localized copies and maybe you've got localized object storage or localized resources from Zadara, maybe you can utilize other technologies from the Veeam portfolio, like Shore Backup and Recovery, to be able to test that you can actually do a recovery on site. So that gives you the classic Veeam 3, 2, 1 capability, 3 data copies, 2 different media at least 1 copy offsite, and at least 1 immutability. But the key then is, can you actually test your recoverability? And I think that's really where Veeam partners come into their own, and it's really key that you work through that process in terms of your recovery. I'm going to finish off with just a couple more use cases of where we see the market heading and where we see the use cases for Zadara and partners like Node 4. Digital transformation, I think it's a term that's overused, but in the right way, if you're looking to re-platform, if you're looking to rehost, then utilizing Node 4's capabilities, I think they're a very good partner in being able to take you on a journey from where you are today to where you need to be. You may be looking to deploy, agentic pipelines, utilizing MCP servers, A2A, from Google, and integrating that into your data platforms, again, becomes a key part of making the best use of the technology that's available. That business continuity in DR, I've mentioned the capabilities that a partner like Node 4 can bring, again, from that backup and archive perspective, exactly the same. Dev, test, and DevOps environments, again, the multi-tenancy, the ability to provide an AWS compatible cloud from Node 4 enables you to be able to utilize those services. You may want a more cloud native infrastructure. You may want a managed Kubernetes. You may want to make use of Zadara, Tycoon, and Node 4 to deliver that. You may want an alternative to VMware. You may want that as an on-premises capability, and then transition over time. But the key part from where we see, especially you look at the part that Andy alluded to at the beginning of this webinar, is around that sovereignty, maybe repatriation. Where is that data? We live in uncertain times. Taking control of where your data resides becomes a critical part of that. And as we move more to operating LLMs and agentic applications, here's a use case that we built and we demonstrated out from our own DevOps team. Taking data, running that inside of VPC, running an application like Onyx or anything LLM, using an open source large language model, could be Gemma 3, could be Llama 3, 3.14, again, depending upon the GPU capabilities that you've assigned to it. Augmenting that with vector database, Vesper or Chroma, and then embedding that. So taking your existing data, they could be NAS services presented from a Zadara volume. They may be database services that Node 4 is managing on your behalf. They could be internal systems, help desk systems, Slack, Jira, etc. But then you probably want to automate some of this, and this is where that automation using Argo CD, Terraform, CI/CD with GitHub working environments, to automate, when something happens in your environment, to actually get that to actually evolve with an agent that actually makes a decision on your behalf. To be able to do that, you may need to augment that with some high performance environments that may be utilizing NVIDIA GPUs, that may be using those high performance NVMe drives, but then you need to store that somewhere. Having that isolated off in either a block or NAS environment, maybe then archiving that over time. The generative era is going to explode the amount of data that we're storing. Object storage is a great repository for that. And finally, from my perspective, you want a view into all of this. And I think one of the great features we have from our compute element is the ability to have a map of all of your instances, what's connected, what are they talking to? And if you're operating the whole cloud, then you can see across the whole infrastructure very, very simply, very, very easily what's happening within the environment. And it's a great feature that we underplay a little bit. But those of you that get your hands on a Zadara infrastructure and you start to build this, you run a Terraform script, you can actually see these instances building over time. And then if you destroy them, you can see them being destroyed bit by bit. It's a fantastic capability. So to finish off, building a enterprise storage as a service, infrastructure as a service, truly multi-tenant, true scalability from a cloud perspective with cloud economics. Scale it up, scale it down, change as you feel, and make that on demand. We will open it up for the last 10 minutes or so to any questions. But from me, thank you very much. And from Andy, any final comments, Andy, from your perspective?
Thanks, Steve. Nothing major. I think what I would say is that most of our conversations with partners and customers at the moment are a lot of organizations feel it's a very binary option. Either they operate their own kind of estate and mainly Broadcom or VMware, or you go to public cloud. And I think there's so much capability, just like we've looked at today, of kind of alternatives and different approaches, everything from Zadara to a whole range of services we've got in the data center. But that's our job to help customers look at the options. There's a whole ecosystem of things outside of those two worlds that can really address lots of different problems and and capabilities. So yeah, that's kind of our day job really. But no, thanks for running through that, Steve. That was really helpful.
Great. Rebecca, have we got any questions from anybody? Are they all being timid?
Nothing in the chat. If anyone would like to pop a question in the chat or raise their hand to speak, then please do.
Okay.
And if not, just add me on LinkedIn or reach out to Node 4 on that link, or obviously yourself, Steve. I'm happy to pick anything up or have a discussion separately to the webinar. So.
Exactly. Yeah, the contact details are there, and feel free to reach out to either Steve or Randy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I think we've got one question there.
Oh, we've got one.
A question to Node 4. Have you found that Zadara helps you to be more flexible with solutions?
Yeah, certainly. I think, we're a big Broadcom Pinnacle partner, we're a big Microsoft expert MSP, and I think there's quite a bit of rigidity, if that's even a word, in those different models. I think even if you look at Broadcom, we have to buy everything on a 3-year license deal, and there's, it's very, very rigid. So I think what we found with Zadara is a partner that, we can augment our services. We take it as it's an OpEx based managed service. So for me, if we're trying to get scaling into a platform rather than have to go and work out and get quotes for new hardware and everything, it's just a case of, before you know it, there's a load of new disks and systems that have been onboarded and kind of turned up in the system. So yeah, it's a pleasure working with these guys, and it really helps us just stay flexible and agile, as we don't know what's coming around the corner as a provider.
And I think the reverse of that as well, we find Node 4 very flexible, very easy to work with. And I think, that database as a service piece adds in to our capabilities. Organizations tend to struggle with DBA services and not really understand what their data is. So I think there's a lot of complementary there both ways in terms of that flexibility to any size organization, whether that's an enterprise, another service provider. Even when I look at other service providers, they may not have those database services. They can make use of your database services even on their own existing platforms. Okay. Any others?
That's it for now, looks like.
Okay. Then,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Andy. Really, really enjoyed it. Pleasure.
Yeah, cheers, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.